Hello there, I'm Black Bright News, and I just wanted to talk about the Renters' Rights Act. And I wanted to, because sometimes I kind of have empathy for the landlord and I have empathy for the tenant. And I just wanted to kind of share with you how the two are intertwined and why the Renters' Rights Act needed to come into place to create some kind of balance and structure and stability. So, as you know, I'm I read my notes. I kind of I do it mostly because I tend to digress. I'm always forgetting what I want to say. And so when I structure in this way, I know it's not how you may prefer it, but when you think about broadcasters, they have a auto cue or a teleprompter, so it doesn't look as though they're reading notes, but they're doing the same thing that I'm doing. It's just that because I'm a poor little girl in the middle of nowhere, I don't have the sophisticated technology to do it that way. So let me stop chatting. You see what I mean? How I babble on. So when a house is not a home, the landlord and tenant dilemma, the Renters' Rights Act. So there is a quiet moment in everyone's life when the meaning of home becomes painfully obvious. It might be a moment of loss, it might be a moment of fear, a moment when someone tells you you need to leave. It's happened to me. For millions of renters in Britain, that moment has arrived more times than they can count. I would like to tell you a story about a country living through a housing reckoning, not told by politicians, not measured by statistics, not through the people whose lives are shaped by the front door they don't own. This is a story about the Renters' Rights Act, but really it's a story about what it means to feel safe or not safe at all. The sound of a key, there's a particular sound a key makes when it turns in a lock you don't control. It's the sound of dependence, of uncertainty, of a life that is almost always slightly borrowed. For years, Britain's rental sector has been built on borrowed feelings. Some call it flexibility, others call it exploitation, most simply call it normal. But for renters, normal meant living with the constant possibility that everything, every photo on the wall, every toy in a bedroom, every mug in the kitchen cupboard could be boxed up with little warning. For landlords, normal meant managing property quietly, often casually, sometimes chaotically, without the weight of professional framework. Some handled it responsibility, some struggled, some made mistakes, some didn't care. Some cared too much and burnt out, and between these two fragile experiences, something started to fracture. That fracture is where my story begins. The woman who never unpacked. We meet her, she never unpacked completely, her clothes stayed folded in boxes, the spare room remained unclaimed, she never hung the picture of her father on the wall, she didn't want to get attached. Every month her landlord reminded her, I might need the house back. Just so you know. I can't afford the heating, so be ready. He wasn't cruel, he wasn't malicious, he was struggling. But she was terrified, and between his fear and hers, an invisible tension formed, the kind that curls into your stomach and stays there. She says, when you live like that, you don't breathe properly, you hold your breath without meaning to. This is the kind of story that shaped the Renters' Rights Act, not headlines, not outrage, but thousands of quiet lives lived half-packed. And on the other side of town is a man who inherited a single flat. A small one, old boiler, drafty windows, his pension is thin, his savings thinner. He rents the place out because he has to, but every new repair is a punch in the ribs. Every regulation is another page he doesn't understand. Every difficult tenant feels like a threat to the only financial stability he has. When he hears the Renters' Rights Act, Discussed on the news, he feels the panic rise in his throat. He says, people think we're all greedy. I'm not greedy. I'm just trying not to drown. And he's not alone. He represents thousands of small accidental landlords, people who are not frugal, not strict, not trained, sometimes not fair, often overwhelmed. People who never imagined they'd be running a tiny business with so many rules. His fear is real, so is hers, and neither recognises the other's fear as valid. The rental system in Britain was never built to hold the weight placed on it. Not enough social housing, not enough affordability, not enough security for renters, not enough clarity for landlords, too much power on one side, too much vulnerability on the other, a seesaw held together by habit. The Renters' Right Act didn't appear out of thin air. It arrived because renters felt unheard, landlords felt punished, communities felt unstable, and politicians felt pressure building like a storm. Something had to change. But change rarely comes without casualties, emotional, financial, psychological, and that's where Britain finds itself now, in the storm. We often talk about home like it's a soft word, warm, gentle, safe. But home is also a responsibility. Home is vulnerability. Home is power. Home is fear. Tenants fear losing home. Landlords fear losing control of theirs. And yet, this is the difficult truth. Private renting was never designed for permanence. Social housing was, but not private renting. So why do tenants cling to permanence? Because Britain has given them no alternative. Wages stagnated, mortgages became unattainable, housing prices soared, social housing diminished, options shrank. People dream of permanence, not out of entitlement, but out of desperation. So why do landlords cling to control? Because it's their property, their money, their responsibility, their liability, and in many cases, their only asset. They fear being locked into a bad situation with no exit. People cling to control, not out of cruelty, but out of survival. This is the conflict at the heart of the housing crisis, two forms of fear facing each other across the same hallway. The Renters' Right Act is trying to create balance where there has been imbalance for years. It strengthens protections, clarifies obligations, removes arbitrary evictions, demands better living conditions. So does it disadvantage some landlords? Yes, especially those who are unprepared or who relied on flexibility that allowed them to act quickly, sometimes too quickly. Does it empower renters? Yes, in ways many have begged for. Does it solve the housing crisis? No, it can't. It's a plaster on a fracture. But it shifts the conversation. It tells tenants, you are no longer disposable. It tells landlords, you are now accountable. It tells Britain, security matters. If you peel back the layers of politics, law and economics, you find one quiet engine driving the whole crisis: fear. Renters fear eviction, landlords fear entrapment, government fears backlash, communities fear instability, and fear when left unchallenged turns into suspicion. Suspicion turns into prejudice, prejudice turns into division. It's worth noticing that fear lies at the heart of both housing insecurity and prejudice. When people feel their home, their money, or their future is at risk, their minds instinctively look for threat. Sometimes it's the tenant, sometimes it's the landlord, sometimes it's the neighbour who looks or lives differently. In both cases, fear twists perception, turning ordinary human behaviour into suspicion or resentment. The link is simple. Insecurity does make people defensive, and when we're defensive, we're more likely to blame others. It has to understand before it judges. It has to acknowledge pain before it prescribes solutions. So what does the Renters' Right Act represent? Justice, threat, balance, burden, hope, cost? Perhaps it represents something much simpler. A country finally admitting that the way we live, the way we house our people is not working anymore. Not renters, not landlords, not families, not communities, Perhaps the Renters' Right Act is not the solution. Perhaps